Some years ago, I was alone at reading. Just then, I felt something was passing by my mind. I turned around and saw no one. After a while, I felt the same. This time it felt like something was crawling on the ceiling. I looked up and saw nothing. I felt something was off. Just then, I removed my steps and saw an ant crawling by. To me, it was just an ant. To someone who believes in the paranormal, this ant will become a ghost. Today, I want to talk to you about the psychology and paranormal and how popular media has shaped what we think and what we see. Now, let's talk about one such paranormal phenomenon that is known to all fanatics like the ancient. What image comes to your mind when you hear the term ancient? Is it a young woman in white saree, wax? Or if it's someone who's born after 2010, it could be a girl wearing cargo pants wearing a t-shirt. Let me show you how people imagined ancient 1500 years ago. Well, this doesn't seem scary or terrifying. What's happening? Isn't ancient something to be scared of? Before I answer to that, let me tell you the concept of ghosts in ancient Indian traditions. Contrary to popular beliefs, there were no ghosts in the ancient India. When I mean the concept of ghost, the popular idea is that the ghost is the wandering spirit of soul of a dead person. The soul that has made it to move on to the afterlife and lives in earth and may go somewhere to be. Such revenge-seeking ghosts are popular characters of horror literature and movies. You may think that such an idea is universal and has been present in human traditions across generations, but that's not the case. In ancient Indian beliefs and traditions, once a person dies, the soul is reborn as some other life. It may not be a human in fact. And there is another way of it, moksha or liberation. That is when the soul escapes the cycle of life and death and emerges paranormal. There was no concept of a trapped soul staying back in the mortal world. You won't find such ghost stories in Vedas, Puranas, or any Itihasas. However, instances of souls being exchanged in different bodies were used in ancient Indian folk and dramas. One such place is Bhagavad which I adapted for film in 2021. It's a 7th century play attributed to Bodhayana. It talks about the soul of a monk being active in a conscious body, while the soul of a conscious is inside a monk's body. I can claim that it was the same case across all of India because there were of course regional beliefs and traditions in India who were not lived out right in Islam. Most of them only survived through oral traditions. As a result, maybe only Vedic beliefs were passed down as they had Indian compositions and texts. When it comes to other parts of the world, both method mark ancient Mesopotamia. The oldest epic of the world, the epic of Gilgamesh, which was written in 2100 BCE, a ghost makes its appearance. There are mentions of ghosts in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, and ancient Rome. In ancient Greece, ghosts appear in literature like the Odyssey by Homer. In ancient Rome, the writer Pliny the Younger recorded one of the earliest haunted house stories in history. But these ghosts are not terrifying. Many were simply spirits unable to find peace. But the concept of ghosts were rigid during the Victorian period in the Western world. The Victorian era experienced an explosion of ghosts worldwide. Industrial accidents, epidemics, and wars and families lost loved ones, people. Well, that was the case in most of human history. But this time people were more connected, people were more literate, and trained to speak to the dead souls of the relatives, of the customers, for a fee of course. Fiction writers like Edgar Allan Poe and Mark Davies and Charles Dickens frequently featured ghosts in their stories, which further solidified the idea of a dead person's spirit going around. Now let's come back together. The printing press and publication industry made its mark in progress. It was here that the European ghost and vampire fiction began to circulate widely. Malayalam writers found it interesting and started using these ghosts for their stories. But they needed a familiar word, and there was English legends of supernatural vampire and female figures common in Kerala. It was Yakshi. If you remember the sculpture of Yakshi I showed you, this is a photograph I took from the museum in Jaipur. The sculpture dates back to 4th century CE and was discovered in Varanasi. This doesn't seem to be scary. That was exactly my thoughts when I usually see idols of Yakshi or temples. But no god figures have to do with sacred spaces. Then I realized that Yakshi was not supposed to be a French speaking ghost or vampire. They were actually guardians of sacred grounds. They are nature spirits, and they were supposed to be worshipped. In ancient Indian art, Yakshis were not monsters. They were symbols of fertility, abundance, and nature. One of the most famous examples is the pre-Classical Yakshi figure from the scientists who were created over 2000 years ago. She is not terrifying, she is graceful, that meaning and protective. Wait a minute, if you may ask, what happened to the story of Kalyanka Devi? Like I said, the original folklore tells the tale of a French nation, but not as a ghost, but as merely reborn again as another woman, and haunting the man, who by the way had no idea why she was haunting him, because it was his next life as well. Stories of French taken in next lives are frequently named Puranas and Itinasas. There is another interesting possibility about how the ancient and Indian world. If we go back 300 or 400 years ago, traveling at night to roads to Kerala and Spain, with the landowners, traders, often carried gold, jewelry, and other valuables by travel. In some historical accounts and oral traditions, we find references to a particular kind of flow. A traveler could encounter a beautiful woman standing alone in the roadside, often within the night. She would appear on sometimes very, very honest. The traveler believed that he had encountered a lonely woman in business, perhaps an opportunity for romance, to follow her deeper into the woods. And then, hidden in the darkness, a group of bandits would meet. The traveler would be ambushed, killed, and go. When such incidents happen regularly, people would get warning each other. Do not trust the woman standing around the real man. Over time, suspicion slowly transforms into mythology and legends. Mysterious woman of the forest became something more than woman. And the word Yakshi, which already existed in Indian fiction as a supernatural female nature spirit, gradually got attached to this frightening narrative. Later, literature, theatre, and cinema added further layers to the story. Tragic backstories, revenge plots, supernatural powers. carbon monoxide, poisoning, networks, hallucinations, and sense of low frequency sound waves called infrasound can result in feelings of fear. Sleep paralysis can make people feel as if the supernatural is sitting on top of them. Many famous government houses where nature counter are working on masses using carbon monoxide. Many people who report seeing ghosts may be experiencing carbon monoxide exposure for psychological factors. The idea of ghosts was invented by humans to cope with the fear of ghosts. To create a sense of closure when loved ones are gone after you. To have a sense of hope that it won't be a complete full stop once we die. However, such ideas backfire into modern humans. We create